than you are safe inside your homes. Now imagine the long period that you have been controlled. It affects your minds, it affects your psychology. You are still under terror, you are still under fear, right? And gradually your fear, you start expressing to your neighbors that this happened to us and we couldn't do anything. So now this is the situation which starts with the post-colonial theory as well, because all of us know our countries, India as well as Indonesia, has been under colonial rule for quite a long time. We have, say, around 200 years of colonial rule in our country, and the same stands true for Indonesia as well. So okay, so now I begin my lecture. So this was the situation that these people, the empire or the imperial forces, they came, the European forces, they came to our countries. First, they came as East India Company. They wanted to have, business with our countries, and gradually they captured the whole country. They took away our resources, they subjugated us, they made us their slaves in our own houses, in our own countries. We became their servants, we became their slaves. So when they went away, what the people in the native land, like native means Indonesia or India, that is your native land, that is your native place, what people, how they reacted after the colonial rule ended. This is what we study in post-colonial theory. So coming over, you can see what is post-colonial theory. I have taken a quotation from Charles E. Bresler, and he says post-colonial theory is a set of theories in philosophy, means what you think, what you feel, and various approaches to literary analysis. What we do is we do literary analysis. Whoever has written about after we became free, after we became independent, is considered as literature produced in post-colonial era. So that are concerned with literature written in English in countries that were or still are colonies of other countries. So any literature that is produced in those countries which were under colonial rule, the analysis of those literature is called post-colonialism or post-colonial theory. And what is transitivity analysis? It relates to post-colonial theory because uh, we have certain symbols, certain signs, kind of, verbs and grammatical structures that identify the hidden agenda of the people and agencies in power. Supposing I am in power, and what I say to you, like I might say, please mute yourself, right? Here I mean I'm requesting you, and if I say mute yourself, so this is my tone of authority, of power. So what is uh, hidden in my saying mute yourself? The hidden agenda behind this statement is that I'm trying to control you, I'm trying to scold you to mute yourself. So now this does not remain a request, but it becomes an order to you. So transitivity analysis is that analysis of all those literatures that were produced during the colonial times by the empire, and after we became independent, by the authors in our country, where we try to bring out the hidden agenda of the colonial rule through different types of verbs, the kind of words used, the grammatical structures, how what they want to do is they want to control the meaning and the idea, the perspective. So I hope I'm clear with this. So, just in a single line, post colonialism is the study of how the colonization affects not only the colonized but also the colonizer. So, don't be misguided by the idea that post colonialism means what we have to give after we became free of the colonial rule. Hmm? So, post colonialism in post-colonialism, we study the effects of colonization in our country on our people as well as on the people who came to rule us, the colonizer as well as the colonized. One very important aspect when we are studying post-colonialism and post-colonialism is the difference between, I hope you can see the two ways of writing post-colonialism, post-hyphen colonialism and post-colonialism without a hyphen. I hope you know the rules or how to use hyphen. So in the first post-colonialism with a hyphen, post means anything which comes after. So when you became free, like Indonesia became free in 1945, India became free in 1947. So this is a chronological or a historical context after we became free. So first post-colonialism is that. So it signifies a period, a historical period, a chronological period, like in your country after 1945, in my country after 1947. But now what we study is it's been many, many years now when we became free, but still we are studying post colonialism. So now post colonialism symbolizes or signifies certain characteristics in the literatures produced in our country. So those set of characteristics now become post-colonialism. Okay, and I'm going to discuss what characteristics. So you can study post-colonialism even today, though you have been free for such a long time, but still you can, I think for 72 years for your country, perhaps. So post-colonialism now becomes attribute. It is a set of characteristics that you try to identify in the literatures produced in our countries. Okay. What was the justification? When the English people or the Europeans came to our country, what did they say initially to the world? Why are they here in our countries? So, first of all, they said that it is a moral mission. They said that we are here to do some good to these nations who are backward. They considered us backward nations. They considered us as underdeveloped or undeveloped. They considered the native as uncivilized, uneducated, pagan. This is what they considered us. So the brackets, I am in the brackets is what I have written. So it was, they said it was a moral mission, but it was their immoral mission, because they did not come to our countries for doing any good to us. They came for a very selfish reason, that was to rule us and to take away the riches that were there in our country. The materials, whatever we had, they came here to take that away. So colonial subjects are uncivilized. They said to the world, why are we in Indonesia? Why are we in India? It is because the natives or the people, the Indonesian people or the Indian people, they are uncivilized, they don't have any culture, they are very backward, they are weak in comparison to us. We are very strong, they are very weak. While the Western whites have material as well as moral superiority over us. So they said that we are whites, and we have superiority over them. They are very inferior people and we are very superior. So that is why when we talk of transitivity analysis, when you say, you don't call a white person white, they call themselves as fair. We are fair. And fair means somebody who is justified. When you say that it's a fair practice, means it is a justified practice. So fair and black, fair and brown, fair and yellow skinned. So for them, they were fair means they are white skinned as well as justified in doing whatever they want. So to unearth this is what transitivity analysis does. So it becomes the white man's burden. They called it a white man's burden. I hope you understand what this term means. They said that it is our duty. We are white people, we are superior to them. So it becomes our burden or our duty to come to their countries and civilize them and to colonize them, to make them civil just like us, to make them civilized, to bring culture to their society. The cultural logic being the view of the West that the non-West is genetically inferior, culturally, socially, educationally, and so on. And what was the logic behind this? They said that the natives or the people who we are going to colonize, they are by their birth, genetically, they are very inferior to us. They don't have any culture. They don't have any advanced society. They don't have any education in their system. They don't have a good religion. They called us pagan. So and so on. So I have taken a quotation from the book Empire and Emancipation, Power and Liberation on a World Scale by Jean Nedovine Peets. And he says, racism is the psychology of imperialism. They say that we have come here, we are going to these colonial nations because we want to make them advanced like us, but behind their agenda, behind their idea was racism. And this was in their mind, the discrimination on the basis of our creed, of our race, the spirit of empire, because racism implies the element that makes for the righteousness of empire. They say that we are right, we are correct in coming to their nation, because as a race, these people are very inferior to us. Hence, racism is not simply a byproduct of empire. So when we say that when Europeans came to our country, after that racism developed, it is wrong, because racism was the beginning point of the empire's rule on us, because they considered us as inferior as a race in comparison to them. So racism was the basis on which they came to our countries and they came ruled us. Now, what are the key concepts when we talk of post-colonialism? And these key concepts are what we study in literature that is produced in our countries even today. So when I come to the last slide, I will tell you how to apply post-colonialism to the documents in your being written in your country. So the key concept, first understand the binary, because whenever we talk of post-colonialism, we talk of binary. Binary means it comes from the word bi. Bi means two. So two sides, right? So in case there is a circle or in case there is a line, a vertical line, so the two ends of a line, or if it's a circle, then one is the center and one is the circumference of the circle or the margin of the circle. When you make a circle, you must have all made a circle with a compass. So you put one, the pointed, the pointed leg to your paper, and with a pencil you draw a circle. So that circle is the margin and the center is the center, you know. So whenever we talk of post-colonialism, we study binaries, means two ends either of a line where the top end and there is a bottom end, or when we talk of a circle, the center and the margin. So the two ends of any relationship, when there are two people standing each in front of each other, you know for sure that one is going to be a little more powerful than the other, a little up than the other. So whenever we are discussing post-colonialism, we talk of relationship between two people, two groups, two countries, where one country is more powerful than the other. No country can stand at an equal level. That you need to understand. Somebody is going to be a little higher, and the other one is going to be a little lower in hierarchy. So binaries, the two ends, and this relationship of power is what we study in post-colonialism. Any two people, like for example, in your families, your father holds the power over the rest of the family members. Just by chance, you know that, or your grandfather holds the power over the rest of the family members, and whatever he says, your grandfather says, everyone follows in the family. Now, God forbid, I'm not wishing that, but just in case your grandfather passes away. Now, who holds the power? The eldest son in the family holds the power. It may be your father, it may be your uncle, who now becomes the head of the family. And now, whatever he says is followed by the rest of the family. So, this relationship between two people, two groups, two countries, or one person and a group, where one is higher and other is lower, this relationship of power is what we study in post-colonialism. How the powerful treats the weaker one, and how the weaker one responds to the power of the of the powerful. So when we are talking of post-colonialism, the powerful is the European nations, or the colonizer, and the weaker is the colonized or the native people, the people of that nation. Now, it comes alterity. Colonized, native. The second aspect in post-colonialism is the colonized or the native loses power in the society and becomes inferior as compared to the colonizer. So he makes you believe that you are inferior to him. The powerful one makes you believe that you are not my equal. You don't stand on my level. And what happens is, because every literature is about identity. I hope you understand what identity is. Identity is yourself, who you are, what is your standing in the society, who you are. I am not what others define me, but I am what I am from within myself. So what happens is, the colonizer, he suppresses you, he oppresses you, he tortures you so much that gradually you lose your identity and you lose the power in your own society, and you become inferior to the colonizer. One another aspect that we study in post-colonialism is being the other. So other is a very important concept that we study in post-colonialism. And what is being other? Other means somebody not like me, but somebody who is other than me, who's different from me. Hmm? So how different? Because when we talk of humans, we say that all humans are equal. We are like each other. We have same two eyes, a nose, a mouth, ear. We have heart. Everyone has the same kind of features. The physical features may differ, but basically all humans are same. The same kind of brain structure, the same kind of body structure, everything. But when you are talking of an animal, you say that he is different. Means, and whenever you talk of difference, you talk of somebody who is not like you, means you are superior and the other person is inferior to you. So whenever we talk of the concept of othering or other in post-colonialism, we are talking of somebody who is not like us, who is lower to us. So being the other. So this is what we also study in post-colonialism. Then unhomeliness or exile. What happens is that when you might have come across, when you have read your history, you might have come across one thing, that is when the colonizers came to your country, because this happened in India as well. They used to take away Indian soldiers to fight with other nations. They used to take away Indians in their ships to UK and all those places where they had captured, where they had made their colony, to work as laborers. So you are exiled from your country. You are forcefully taken away from your country. And what does this create? I hope you must have come across a term called diaspora. Diaspora means shifting of you from your native place, from your home to another foreign country. It may be willing, you might be traveling to, say, America for studies or for better prospects, or you are forced to go to some nation where you are made to work as labor class. So the colonizer did this to us in our country. So, and what does it create? It creates a state of limbo. Limbo means in betweenness. You are neither of here nor of there, without a certain or definite identity, because your identity is created within your society. You are so and so in your society. You are the eldest son of so and so in your family. So this is your society. You are so and so in Indonesia. But what you are in, for example, they take you to Trinidad and Tobago and they make you work like a labor over there. So you are neither of Trinidad and Tobago nor you remain of Indonesia. So your identity is dismantled. You don't possess any identity. You become in between. That is, you are neither remaining of Indonesia nor you become a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, because there you are just a servant of the Europeans working over there. So, and what happens is that you are caught between two cultures, the culture of Trinidad and Tobago and the culture of Indonesia. You cannot forget the culture of Indonesia. You cannot fully adapt the culture of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is why you are caught in between. And this in betweenness is what diaspora also studies. So, diaspora is another field that we study in post colonialism. So, being literally moved as a result of colonialism. Double consciousness. Another important term that we study in post colonialism is double consciousness. Consciousness means feeling of something. Like you live in Indonesia, you have an Indonesian concept consciousness, like you know the culture, you behave in a particular way. But when you are forcefully taken to some other country, again, I take the example of London. You are made to work in factories over there. You are forcefully taken. So what happens? Memory or awareness of the one's own culture. You don't forget Indonesia. You don't forget the kind of food you used to have in Indonesia. You cannot forget the family gatherings in Indonesia. You don't forget the way you pray in Indonesia. And you are taken to another country. So this nostalgia, this remembrance of your own culture creates a double consciousness. Means you are in London right now, working there, behaving as they want you to behave, but you don't even forget your own culture. So there is a double consciousness. One consciousness, one mind thinks of Indonesia, and another mind is present in London. So this is double consciousness, which we study in post colonialism. And all these, the last 3 points, they are considered in diaspora as well. So hybridization, that is the last one, the ultimate blending of the culture of the colonized and the colonizer. You don't forget your own culture, you have to, since you are living in London, you have to adapt to their way of living. Like you eat fish and rice in your country, in your homes, but when you move to London, what you do is you have to um, naturally they eat breads more, so you have to start eating bread rather than eating rice over there, because when you go out you don't have any time to cook at home. So when you go out in the to the restaurants for eating, they say that only we have burgers and pizzas and breads if you want to eat. So food is another aspect where we study. Food representation is another aspect where we study post-colonialism. So post-colonialism is a very vast area where so many things are there which you study in post-colonialism. Though I'm not going to take up everything today because it would be very difficult to cover every aspect, but still I'll try to, be to justify the topic that we are discussing today. So hybridization is the mixing of two culture. You remain a little bit of Indonesian and you become or adapt to the culture of the English. So you become Indo is like in India and England, you become Indo-Anglian, right? So mixing of the culture is what hybridization is. Uh, so there are 3, 4 very important critics who have, who initiated the post-colonial theory, who started the discussions on post-colonial theory. So I'm going to take just in very short, uh, 2, 3 people who initiated the post-colonialism or post-colonial theory. So one is Frantz Fanon from Algeria, and he wrote 2 books, The Wretched of the Earth, which came out in 1963, and Black Skin, White Masks, which came out in 1967. And he talks of the psychopathology. Like I told you in the very beginning, that somebody comes forcefully into your house and he controls you for, say, about 6 months or maybe a year. And then when he leaves, you are still shattered in your mind. Your psychology is still of being fearful. Whenever you see any man of that kind, you will just run into your houses and lock your doors, and you will shake in fear and remain inside. So what is that? He has affected your psychology. So Frantz Fanon talks about psychopathology of colonialism, how colonialism impacts the mind of humans, of the colonized. So representation of the native as non-human destroys native identity. This I've discussed earlier. He says that when the colonizer treats the native person as very inferior to him, he destroys the mental stability of the native person. He destroys the identity of the person. So he talks of psychoanalytical theory of colonialism. He says that colonizers' identity establishes in relation and encounter with native identity. So how they become superior to us? Why they say that they are superior to us? So I will give you an example. For example, supposing every time it is day in your country, all together, you will not realize the importance of night because there is daylight continuously for 6 months. There are countries where this phenomena happens. So, uh, continuous day, night. But the importance of day, you will understand when night also comes, because night symbolizes sadness, hopelessness. Day symbolizes a happy, optimistic, a happy, self. So you can relate to day if the night comes. But supposing there is no night at all, continuous day, or another example like happiness and sadness, you realize the importance of happiness when you become sad, or something happens to you, something happens, some tragedy happens in your family or to yourself. Then when everything subsides and happiness comes, you realize the importance of happiness. So this same thing applies over here. The colonizer, when he is in his own country, he is just like another Britisher, or he is just like another European. But when he comes to your country, he can say that I am superior to you. So what Frantz Fanon says, that the colonizer's identity is created only when he compares himself to the colonized. Only when he is standing in front of an Indonesian person, where he can say that this person is inferior to me, he is less educated, he is uncultured, he is uncivilized. Only then he can say that I am superior, I am cultured, I am civilized. So Frantz Fanon says that the colonizer's identity cannot be established alone. When he is in his country, he is another European. But when he comes to your country, he compares himself with you. So his identity is established in relation to your identity, the native identity, who is the other, who is not like him, and he is the other. For native, man starts meaning the white man. So now what they say, that I am civilized, you are uncivilized, I am educated, you are uneducated. So what happens was, gradually the native man, he starts believing that man means white man. If you call him a man, he says that no, I'm not man because I'm very weak, I'm uncivilized, I'm uneducated. Man starts symbolizing white man. So this is what he starts believing in his mind, that whenever he says that who is a man, he will point towards the white man or the colonizer, that he is a man. And who are you? I am like an animal. I am not a man, but he is a man. So native starts imitating the white man, but fails, resulting in violence against his own people. So the tribal wars, what happens is, this is one aspect which Homi Bhabha also talks about. He's another very great post-colonial critic. What happens is that when you find yourself as inferior to the white man or the colonizer, what you do? You start copying, like in your day to day life. When you find somebody very attractive, when you find the behavior of someone in your family or in your university, who talks in a very good manner, who dresses up in a very nice way, who teaches in a very good manner, so what you do, you are so impressed by that person that you start copying his manners, right? So what happens with the native? When he decides in his mind that man means only the white man, he is not a man anymore. So he becomes so enamored, attracted by the white man, that he starts copying his mannerisms. He starts copying his way of talking, his way of reading, his way of dressing up, his way of food, everything. But what happens is that however he may try to imitate the white man, he cannot become the white man. He may start talking like him, he may start dressing up like him, he may start behaving like him, but the white man will never consider him his equal, right? So what happens is that the native starts copying the white man, but ultimately he realizes that whatever he may do, the white man is not going to consider him his equal. So this results in frustration, right? You become very agitated, you become very angry in your mind, that I have tried so much, but still he says that you are different from me, you are not like me. So this frustration of the mind, this anger in the mind, it comes out in the form of violence, attacking his own people, because he cannot attack the white man. He cannot fight the white man. So he starts fighting with his own community, his own people. So that is why Frantz Fanon says that the tribal wars that happen within the country, they happen because of this only. Because the white man, they cannot fight the white man, so they start fighting because of the anger which is there in their mind, they start fighting with their own people. Now, Franz Fanon talks of how to overcome this situation, how to make the English people go out from their country, right? So he says that you have to develop a national consciousness. National consciousness means unite within the country on one level. Like in your country as well, in my country as well, there are different classes, like the upper class, the middle class, the lower class, the Hindus, the Muslims, the Jains, the Christians. There are so many people, and all of them follow different cultures. But he says that if you remain different cultures, if you remain Hindus, you remain Muslims, you remain Christians, you remain Sikhs, and you remain in your own groups, you will never unite. So like a hand has 5 fingers, right? One thumb and 4 fingers. So he says that if you remain, open your hand and you remain separated in your hand, you are not going to, even if you slap a person, it is not going to be that hard. But when you make a fist of your hand and then attack a person, this attack is going to be stronger. So this is what he talks about. He says that you have to develop a national consciousness. Don't develop a Hindu consciousness, don't develop a Muslim consciousness, don't develop a Christian consciousness. You develop a national consciousness which is one. Only when you unite in national consciousness, only then you will be able to throw the master from your country. And he says that this national consciousness develops in 3 stages. What stages he talks about? He says that native intellectual imitates the master, which I have discussed in the in the fourth point, just above this point. So what the native does, he starts copying or imitating the master. Then he feels, the English master does not consider him his equal. So he fails in copying, he fails in upgrading his level to the level of the white masters. So what now he does? He shifts his attention to his own culture. He starts thinking that even if I copy him, he will not consider me his equal. So let me direct my attention to my own people. So I'll think of my own culture. I'm not going to follow his culture. I'll start thinking of my own culture. And he starts celebrating it. He says that my culture is this, my culture is that. We are so good, we are so that. Because he copied the culture of the master still says, no, you are not my equal. So he now diverts his attention towards his own culture, and he becomes very happy, he becomes euphoric, and he starts celebrating it. Now the third stage comes. The celebration stage is over. Now the third stage comes, where he becomes truly anti-colonial. He says that I am not going to follow the master anymore. I am going to be with my country. I'm going to unite with my country. I'm not going to do anything which the master does. And then he shifts his complete attention to his culture. And you all know that nothing is perfect. Everything has some or the other lacunas, or flaws or mistakes in our culture. Some things are good, some things are bad. In every culture, in every religion of the earth, there are good and bad things everywhere. So what he does is he starts analyzing his own culture, and he tries to point out the positive things. And wherever he finds that no, this is not a good idea, so he starts criticizing that bad idea and offers offers a solution to that negative idea. So now he becomes critical of his own culture. He wants to stop people following some bad practices that we might have been doing in our culture. And he says that only follow the positive things. Let us forget about whatever bad things there, like discrimination. You discriminate on the basis of caste, you discriminate on the basis of class. He says that no, this is not the right thing. So let us keep following what is good in our culture, and let us think over what is bad in our culture and replace it with something good. Now, the last part talks of re-emergence of power struggle in post-colony and fears xenophobia. When he talks of national consciousness, there he also criticizes what he is himself thinking. He says that when the country becomes post-colony, like 1945 for Indonesia, 1947 for India, we became free. So he says that, are we now free, completely free? He says that no. He says that I'm fearing one thing, that when the English masters go out of our country, the elite or the rich or the educated people of our country, they will come and sit in the center, and the binary remains forever. That is why when we talk of post-colonialism, we say that the binaries, the power struggle, the relationship between the powerful and the weak, it always remains somebody who is at the margin, somebody who is at the center. The center, at the center is the master, and we are on the margins. Now the master goes out to his own country, so the center remains empty? No. Now somebody from the from within us, from within our country, will become the first prime minister, the first president. He comes at the center. The ministers amongst from ourselves, the rich people from ourselves, they occupy the center, and somebody else occupies the margin. So when we talk of post-colonialism, we say that the relationship between the center and the margin is always moving, always in a motion state, always in a flux. The center never remains empty, neither the margin ever remains empty. So he was fearful of this power struggle when we became independent, and this is what we is happening in our country, which we also call as neo-colonialism or new form of colonialism, where our own people are ruling over us. It may be some business, it may be some group, it may be somebody, but this relationship always remains. And he also fears xenophobia. He says that when we talk of national consciousness, we might, because there are different groups in any country. So he says that some group might say that in the country, that our culture is better than your culture. So he says that the racial discrimination might still exist when we talk of national consciousness. We